How about now? Okay. So do I need to repeat it or not? So it has nice, shiny web UI, and it comes with nice set of tools. So it has a installer or thing to configure it. So when you go back to your machines, oh, you can do it now, but I would like you to pay attention for a while. So you just install FreeIPA server package or IPA server package, depending on whether you are on Fedora or CentOS. And then you run that one command, and it will do everything. And when I say everything, it's like there's nothing more you can wish for. So you have all those components that if you wanted to configure them manually, you would start to read documentation about LDIF, and you would never get it set up. And it will also be very fast. And the faster your machine is, the better it is. But eventually, you will be able to Kinit. And Kinit is good because it means that you have Kerberos. And Kerberos is good because it means that you have single sign-on, which sort of means that you will only enter the password once in a while. And when you Kinit, you can then use the IPA command, which is, again, a nice wrapper, a nice tool, to then manage all those records. So you can see that actually IPA knows about itself. So it's a good start because, for a user to authenticate to a machine, it's good when we know about the machine. And you'll be able to create the user using the command, or you will be able to click add here and create the user here. So you trust me that it works. Now we have the server. We can store the users. To log into a machine, we'd really like your machine to be so-called IPA enrolled. And IPA enrollment means that the server knows not just about itself, as we saw here, but that it knows about the other machines that are in the network. So again, we have that nice command IPA client install, which we will try, but do it after you do the IPA server install. The order is important because otherwise things might not work that well. I've cheated a little bit here in this example because I've edited my resolve conf to point at the IPA server. So when I run it without any parameters, it will just work. Otherwise, you might need to maybe give it a -- server, which is how you say where your IPA server is. And again, it will configure everything that you need. Now, you see that it asks for a user to authenticate to the IPA server. And I give it admin, and I give it admin password. And you obviously don't want to do that in your production environment because you have your laptop or your machine, and you want to enroll it to your corporate IPA server, and no one will give you that admin password. But what we can do, and that's also nice, is you can have the IPA admin pre-create your record in IPA. So it creates the identity. But the identity is not linked to that actual machine. And if they use that -- random, it will generate a so-called one-time password. And if you then give that one-time password to that IPA client install command, it will authenticate using that one-time password.
Sorry for interruption. But
yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah, sorry. You are talking.
So this works too. Now, another thing that we can do with identities, or we have the identities, we have the users and user groups, and we have the host. That's nice. But what IPA, or FreeIPA can do is manage host-based access control rules. So you can say centrally what group of users can use what services on what set of rules, what set of hosts. So if I have a rule which I've named allow SSH, and I've configured it in such a way that Tom can SSH to hosts in a group Linux servers, then Tom should be able to get in. And there are two components there. There's the IPA server which holds the definitions, and then I assume that the server example.com in this example is IPA enrolled server where you have sssd running. So sssd enforces that rule on the client. So we've seen a couple of IPA examples. So who can tell me how to figure out if server example.com is in the host group Linux servers? Anybody? Not the people who know, but the people who don't know. I mean the people who never tried it.
Because of the UID numbers, these are way weird a bit, too high. No.
Well, the UID are high because FreeIPA loves to have them kind of spread out so that it minimizes the clash. But I'm mostly worried about, we have the rule which says that Tom can log into hosts in group Linux servers. And I showed you how to create a user. And I showed you how to, I don't know, find a host. So intuitively, what would you give to IPA command as a parameter? Foobar, where foobar is, you need to be. Okay. So we have, well, the quiz is about finding the host and verifying that it's in a group. So we can go from either way, and we can either do, where am I? We can enter host find server, and we see that indeed it is, the host is in member of the Linux servers group. Or we can go through the group, and it will tell us that I have only one host there, which is server. So it works, and obviously the people who prefer to be visual can say that the best way to verify it is to find it over here. It got pretty small once I enlarged. Yeah, this is better. So we have the host here, and I can find the host. And I can see it here as well. So far it's good because somehow the pieces fit together. And I can kin it not just as the admin, I can kin it as the user and SSH, but SSH needs to be told either in your tilde.ssh config or somewhere that it should use the GSSAPI authentication. Now, we talked about having IPA server and having users there, but in many environments, that's not likely be the case. There will be Active Directory there, and users will be there. And FreeIPA, and together with sssd, what is possible is set up so-called cross-domain trust. So from that point on, any user who authenticates to a Windows domain, which is basically what happens when you log into a Windows machine, gets a Kerberos ticket, and that Kerberos ticket can be understood in your Linux machines. So, and it gets better. Because it is done through the cross-ground trust, and it's somehow managed by FreeIPA server, you can set up host-based access rules for users that come from Active Directory. So suddenly, users you've never heard of will be able to log into your Linux machines. I'll show you, because I have a Windows machine here. Yes, I do, but it's virtual only. And I can start PuTTY, and I've made some preparations. So we'll try to log into server, example, test, and it does not work. Now, what happened? Well, one thing is that no. You should not fall into the trap of having easy answers. So first thing, I seem to be logged in as Alice here. I'm not sure how that happened. So let me relog in as admin, because admin typically has a better view. So we said that to be able to log in, sssd on that machine should allow that. And we have that rule, allow SSH. And we can look how that rule is defined. And we see that Tom can log in to Linux servers as sssd. But obviously, the user on the Windows is not Tom. I've made some preparations, again. So I have user group, which is called AD admins. And I have something set up the way I showed on the previous slide. But the problem is that this AD admins external is not part of that host-based access control for SSH. So the way I can do it is find another group, let's say network admins, and say, OK, I will, where are we? I already have network admins being basically a parent for AD admins. But the problem is that the network admins are not part of the rule. So I go here and I add network admins to the group. I have it here. And let's try it again. I run PuTTY. I load. I run. Voila, I'm there as Bob something, Bob at the AD domain. So some magic happened. I configured something on the IPA server, and then I was able to log in from Windows machine to another Linux machine. And the important thing here is the Linux machine does not know anything about Active Directory. I can IPA enroll another Linux machine. And if I add it to that Linux servers group, or obviously you can structure it any way you like, this will work. There are some tiny details about that user not having home directory, but, well, who cares? So we've seen that there is certain benefit for having FreeIPA, even if you don't intend to have those users there, because they might be coming from some other place. So here's a diagram, and you can stare at it for a while and think about what it means. But the main thing is that any IPA enroll server that I will add into this system will be able to accept connections and accept identity and authentication from Windows clients, even if you don't have to configure anything about Active Directory on them, which obviously cannot be what you care about if you don't have any Active Directory. But then at least your Linux users might enjoy centralized policies. Now, this is what we can do on the operating system level now with the latest versions of FreeIPA server and SSD. But I've promised to talk about web applications. So my goal would be basically the same way as your OS level users being able to SSH to your Linux machines, for access to web applications to work the same. And that should get you both Kerberos single sign-on, that should get you host-based access control, all this stuff. It should be even easier, in a sense, than the OS level, because the guys who work on sssd and FreeIPA spend enormous amounts of time to get things like POSIX, attributes, and UIDs and GIDs right. With web applications, you don't care about them at all. Well, usually. Another goal here is I could start going around and tell every author of every application or web framework to please add some pieces that would connect to sssd or connect to FreeIPA, and then I would do another round, and I would never be satisfied. What we've decided to do instead is look at where the web applications are typically run, and typically there is a web server there, and sometimes it's Apache. So the goal here is for the web application deployed at or near or with Apache to consume authentication, access control, identity provided by Apache modules, usually together with SSD. So that the only thing you need to care about in that web application is what is coming from Apache. You don't need to go out and do things actively. You will get things from Apache modules. And there's a precedent to it. Anybody remember HTTP basic authentication? Well, it's not nice because you have that pop-up that you can never get rid of. And but when it works, when you put in correct login and password, your application will get remote user environment variable. It might get something else via some different mechanism, but eventually you will be able to get the identity of the user, typically a login. So our goal here is to do the same, not just for basic authentication, but for other authentication mechanisms as well, and also to get additional information that your web applications might need. Because having a login is nice, but you don't care about logging at all. You care about what's the email of this user so that I can send them all those emails about things they've done in my system and so on. So one thing that we looked at was PAM access control or user validation. So we have new module, mod auth ends at PAM, and normally when you use the basic authentication or a digest or whatever, you have those authorization providers, but you typically use the require valid user because when the user has authenticated, you think that it is okay for them to get in. This might not be the case because let's say you have an application for finance. You want only finance people to log in, and you can filter that in that application, but usually the application would auto-create the record for that user, for that authenticated user, the first thing after they've logged in. So if you, as network administrators or developers, happen to have Kerberos ticket and click on URL of your company's controlling finance or ledger application, your record will be auto-created because, well, the organization has set up single sign-on and you are signed on. With this, you can use PAM, maybe with PAM SSO using SSD, to restrict access on Apache level. So the application will never see you authenticated. another module that we thought would be nice is, well, not everybody is keen on Kerberos. People like to enter their logins and passwords because they're proud that they can remember them. But at the same time, it's good to have those users only in one central place and have the validation done against that central place. And so PAM can do that. PAM can do that when you use SSH. So why couldn't we use PAM when we're logging on the web? But we don't want that basic authentication pop-up. We want the workflow of that application to be as nice as the developer of that application has meant it to be. You know, all those colors and things. We'll see some. So we have a module which can intercept a submission to a login form and try to do a PAM authentication and account validation. And when it passes, it will set up what? If you did that, if you implemented that, what would you set for the application to consume? You know, I don't want answers from people who know. I want answers from people who can figure that out without reading my slides. Okay, so it will set the remote user environment variable. So your user has entered something into the login form, login password, click enter. But before your application can get into that data and run it through the local Postgres database to check the login password, we'll send it through the PAM stack. And if it passes, we'll just say, OK, the user is authenticated. Note that this is not about HTTP authentication per se. So there will never be a status 401 involved for those of you who know what 401 is. And the last thing that we thought would be nice is if the user coming from Active Directory or FreeIPA server has authenticated to your application, you want to know more about them than they are Bob. So we have a mod lookup identity module which talks to sssd. And as we said, sssd together with FreeIPA makes it possible to know about users that come even from Active Directory. And this module will look at that remote user being set in that when Apache is processing the request. It's not remote user, it's RRO user, but it will look at the user that is authenticated and get information about that user. Do environment variables or whatever you decide, but environment variables are good for basically seeing how things work. If your web framework does it differently, you will use meta or whatever. But it's pretty much the same. And we can get any attributes and push them to the application or provide them to the application. So then the application, when the application sees that Bob has logged in, it does not need to go out, do another connection somewhere, LDAP, whatever, to get those attributes. It will just get them. They're already there. And it's going to be fast because SSSD has probably cached them already as well. So here's some basic overview how things work. This time the HTTP request is processed from the left, not from the top. So you first have the authentication, and typically you would have Kerberos or something. And what we've added is access control or access check. We've added the interception module, which can do authentication and the access check instead of the typical HTTP authentication. And we've added a way to get some additional information about the user that is currently being logged in that HTTP request. So demo time, because I'm talking too long. Foreman. There is an application, and it allows me to log in, so I can log in and see what's there. So Let's make it smaller so that I have UI I know. There's only one user in that application. The application does not know about any other user. So let's try to log in as Tom, because we saw that we have Tom account somewhere. So I log in, log out here, log in as Tom. And now there are two possibilities, either works or not. And when it does not, you can try to figure out what's wrong. So we could try to look at the IPA, at the definition, and obviously for the foreman I don't have allow SSH, I have allow foreman. And when I scroll down to see who is allowed to log in, well, it's not Tom. We can see it on the foreman side, and foreman is just an example. It can be, I know there are foreman people here, so that's why I did this, demo with foreman. But you can do it with any other application. So here's what happened. We knew it was Tom, so the authentication passed. But then we got the permission denied from the PAM stack, and permission denied means while we trust you that you are Tom, well, you are not allowed to log in. So how do we fix it? Well, let's add Tom here, and that should work. Tom can log in as a user to foreman. And now we have logged in, but you will say, well, this is not very nice because there's permission denied there. And this is actually good, because it means that we've logged in, but I don't have rules in that application set, or I have rules in that application set in such a way that the user by default cannot do anything more. Let's try to log in as my Active Directory user, because that's going to be interesting too. So I have to double click or what? No, here. So click to log in, and well, error. I don't even know what that means, it just says that it's not good. But again, we can either look at the log, and it says authorization failure. Oh, well, it says permission denied. So again, we see that the authentication has passed, but the user is not allowed to get in. So how do we fix it? Well, we have that group prepared already with, I think, network user it was. So we say, OK, network users can get in to our foreman application. And now when I do Control-R, I can log in and now see there's no permission denied there. So what happened? How is it possible that Windows users have more permissions in my application, Linux application, more permissions than a Unix user? Well, what happened here is that I have the application set up in such a way that it consumes group membership. Exactly. So I have a group, and this is, now we are purely in the realm of that application. I have network admin external. What's that? I'm not using this anymore. I don't know what's happening. I will show you here. Log out, log in. It's going to be fast. So we have the user groups here, and I have groups set in such a way that it assigns role admin to any member of external group network admins. So because I have it set up in such a way that Linux users in Active Directory actually become network admins in FreeIPA, and I have it configured in such a way that network admins have additional privileges or permissions in that application, things work. Do you want me to fix things for Tom? Or do you want me, I'll show you Alice, because Alice is good as well. So I can kin it as Alice. I can log out. Where am I? Here. So far there is admin. It was there. Bob and Tom. I log out. I log in. Do I enter password? No, because Kerberos. Okay, so at the very beginning we said Kinit. Kinit is good because it gives you single sign-on, and you saw that I got into that application as Alice, and the account is here. So it's good that I'm in because there's the account there, and obviously things work because I think that Alice is member of network admins. We can check. Alice. Where is she? Here. Users, network admins. So, member of group network admins, and it can get as complex as you want. So, I'm working with 3 users here. You can make it very complex. So, network admins contains those external people, and Alice is special. We can do the same with other applications. And the important thing here is that for Foreman, we did not have to implement anything about FreeIPA, sssd, Active Directory. What we did was, in that HTTP request, we had to make some small tweaks to understand that whatever the Apache modules are providing is to be trusted and basically handled. So the benefit for the application is clear. Now, if you have a web application, what should you do to it so that things can work for you like they do for me here in Foreman demo? Well, chances are that your application somehow, somewhere has a long forgotten feature about consuming the basic authentication. So that's a good start. Typically, it's done in such a way that when you enable it, it will require the authentication upon every request. That's not too good, because if you do that with Kerberos, you will renegotiate on every request. So it's better if your application has a logon URL. It's also easier to do optional Kerberos. We saw that with the Foreman. When I had a ticket as Alice, I got in straight away. But when I did not have the ticket, I was presented with that logon form, which was then authenticated again against FreeIPA. Another thing that you might need to look at is when there is a submission of your logon form, that post submission that we intercepted. People, or the code that I've seen, so at least, they tend to think that if the remote user is already set, that it's a bug. Well, it's not. Get used to the fact that that people can configure the setup in such a way that even for the logon form, the authentication that is provided by Apache should be taken into account. The application can process those additional attributes about groups, emails, whatever. And at the same time, it is up to the application to handle roles and mapping from those group membership to roles. We don't want to do that in Active Directory or in FreeIPA. It's enough that the HR will put networking people to network group and finance people to finance group. And if they do it on a more granular level, the better. You can use it in your application. If not, you will then need to sort out things in your application in more detail. Okay, so this was about, we have ways to authenticate on an operating system level, and we now have ways to do it on web applications as well. Some projects have already been amended. Spacewalk, Foreman, Manage IQ. I have an example of Django, if you love to see Django. And while we probably will not go around and fix all the other applications to take advantage of this, we are certainly happy to answer questions and help. Will you have some questions, please? Yes?
It's not directly web applications, but how well does Kerberos work for well-known databases like Postgres, MySQL, and stuff like that?
How long does Postgres work? How well does Postgres work for databases? Well, there is some support. You might get authentication, but not encryption. So it might be there, but it really depends.
Is there work going to improve this by so much?
There's thinking about there being a work. Other question?
Yes, so the one problem, right, was like getting Firefox to recognize Kerberos, right, is like not a trivial exercise for a normal user.
Well, it is. You just said that negotiate trusted URI and you're done.
So is there any plan to try to make that any nicer? Or?
I have no idea. It's nicer with Internet Explorer because you don't have to fiddle with those about config. You do it in internet security, internet sites.
Can it work with more than one domain at the same time?
Can it?
Work with more than one domain at the same time?
Yes.
Okay. Firefox?
Yes.
Yes. You can have a list in Firefox. Any other question? Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any examples of a case where you have a project where you might want this integration and you might not want this integration? Where's the logical place to switch between?
Okay, so is there a way to distinguish applications where you want to do it and where you don't want to do it? To me, you might possibly want to do it everywhere because you are a web developer, you have nice application. You are coming to sell that application to a large organization, and you say, well, and we have this nice web UI-based interface to manage your users and groups and stuff. And they say, well, that's all fine, and we are sure that it will help handle 20 users as you show us. But we already have 7,000 people in our FreeIPA or LDAP source.
So let me ask the question slightly differently. Assume that I'm in an upstream project and I never plan in upstream to integrate with FreeIPA, but in the downstream I say, okay, that's well and good, and I want to switch to FreeIPA. Where's the logical place in this project?
Okay, so one thing to remember here is, we are proposing additional variables, and we are showing it, and we are showing it with FreeIPA and sssd. But the same thing will probably happen when you do SAML, as Simo showed here. You will get the authentication or the information about the authenticated user, not from your application, not based on the authentication done by your application, but you will get it from Apache. So it's not just sssd, and we focused on sssd here because I wanted to show the cross-route things and stuff. But for your application, it actually makes sense to be willing to accept that information from Apache modules just before there might be more of these use cases in the future. Well, the last one.
Apache is obviously not the only HTTP server in the world. Is there integration between SSD and other web servers?
One thing, it's not integration between SSD, as I just tried to explain. The question was, what about other web servers? We try to look at Nginx, but so far Apache is our main focus. And we can totally understand that, well, typically you can deploy that application under different web servers. And we can totally understand if people don't want this, they want to use their web server, they will not have it. Well, there's no harm in that application supporting it when deployed with Apache, and well, not supporting it because when you use it with different web server, it will not provide the data. So, well, it will not work, but it should not be a problem. Thank you. If you have any more questions, I'll be here, but then we'll go to get the food. So, but I don't want to hold you up, guys who want to get the food right away.
Mikrofon, to nevím, je to kontrolovat.
Tím, jak jsi spustil tak pěkně na nás, tak to nebylo poznat.
Já dokážu tady takovou...
Vlastně, jenomže problém, že to pak nebude na